Chapter 149 to 152. In a few seconds after Brawl's speech, Gohan was already on the ring to start his fight. And as our little hero feared, he became the focus of the entire world. Came house. Right now. It seems now is turn of the next surrealist combat. What the hell will happen this time? What wonders will we see next? And our next hero is... Hey! A little boy. He is too young. I don't think he even started elementary school. What the hell is such a little boy doing fighting against sadistic and insensitive monsters like them? I say without fear of being wrong that the parents of that child are disgusting, useless, irresponsible and unbalanced beings. How can they allow their young child to risk their life in this way? They should be embarrassed. Is fucking disgusting. Please, if someone recognizes this child, Nafati US with the number that appears on the screen in order to report his parents. Said the crazy TV commentator who hadn't yet been fired. Commentator who was less and less heard here, because... Gohan. What are you doing? This is... Chi-Chi shouted like a hysterical woman possessed by a hysterical demon as she rocked the television from side to side with the intention of breaking it against the ground. Calm down, Chi-Chi. Her father and Oolong shouted, who tried to grab her to prevent her from destroying the television or hurting someone. Gohan. Get ready. Your punishment will be terrible. Chi-Chi shouted to the heavens while her father and Oolong held her as if she were a dangerous madwoman. Back to the battlefield. Yuish. I just had a chill. Gohan said as he advanced to the center of the battlefield, where Yam was waiting for him from a few minutes ago. So you're the one with whom that monster intends for me to lose, the son of Kakaroto. Yam said as he looked at Gohan's small boy's body, which seemed to be somewhat rigid, surely because he was nervous. That's right, my name is Gohan. Nice to meet you, said Gohan introducing himself to Yam in a very polite and shy way. And seeing Gohan's shy and even friendly demeanor, Yam began to doubt Gohan's abilities and Broly's intentions, but even so she didn't lower her level of alertness and hostility. Don't believe that because you are a child I'll be soft with you, microbe. Okay, penultimate match. Start staring at each other, hate each other and... begin. Broly yelled, starting the penultimate match of his first, but possibly not the last tournament. And just as he announced the start of the match, Yam quickly attacked Gohan, who seemed to be distracted for some reason. And in these cases, you obviously have to take the opportunity to attack. Gohan. Krillin and the others shouted when they saw that Gohan could be in serious trouble. Hey. However, Gohan was able to react in time and block that half-surprise attack despite having to recoil due to the power of the impact. But Yam didn't stop, she continued pushing him aggressively to not lose the advantage she had obtained with her first move. Pam. Palm. Splash. And despite the fact that Yam was completely dominating the start of the match and Gohan could only be on the defensive, trying to prevent being hit and distancing himself from her to start again in a favorable position. Gohan managed to defend himself perfectly from almost all the attacks, preventing all those blows from a direct impact, even though he couldn't stop some of them from hitting him. Wow, he's not doing it wrong at all, said the Z Warriors who hadn't seen Gohan in action yet. Of course. Who do you think has trained him? Broly replied, taking pride in his student before his friends. He is very tense. But little by little he begins to warm up, said Piccolo, who wasn't entirely satisfied with the way Gohan was fighting. And Piccolo was right, little by little Gohan began to warm up and with it he moved with more ease and precision, he was managing to adapt to Yam's ferocity and he even managed to counterattack sometimes. Until... Palm. Gohan managed to block a punch from Yam and grabbed it with his hand, and quickly his hand lit up. Shit. Thought Ginger, who tried with all her strength and speed to get rid of Gohan's light grip and get as far away as possible. Since she was about to launch an energy attack at close range while he had her partially immobilized. Energetic attack that she managed to avoid by a hair's breadth, moving away to the other end of the ring. But with this, Gohan had achieved his goal, to drive Yam away and stop his dominance in this combat. Good. Now he can attack. Hey. Why isn't he attacking? Krillin said, who didn't understand why Gohan hadn't taken the opportunity to carry out another attack and turn the tables. He just stayed in the same place looking at Yam. This boy is more than he appears. As I supposed it will not be easy, but... There is something very strange about him, Yam thought, who kept his distance from Gohan for precaution. This brat. It has a lot of potential, but what should his power be right now? Vegeta thought upon see that this little brat wasn't for nothing the supposed student of the Namekian and Broly, so he proceeded to take another tracker of his deceased slaves to analyze the power of Gohan. And after lengthy computations, Futurama joke. Yam! His power is 6,369 units and I don't think he's hiding it now. It is very high, but it is less than yours. Don't overestimate yourself, but don't overestimate his either, Vegeta said to help one of his companions in combat. Something that surprised everyone, since until now he hadn't even said a word of encouragement to anyone. Near to the stage as the fight continued. Gohan's ki. It is strange. It is as if he had something mixed with it. Something I don't know what it is, but for some reason it makes it stronger and more special. Mutant Rashi, who was analyzing Gohan, the son of his most outstanding pupil with great interest. As a fellow sensei he was very interested in seeing how far Broly and Piccolo had made Gohan advance with his martial arts, what kind of mystical techniques had he learned from the strangest and most mysterious beings he knew. And above all, see what the strongest child on earth was capable of. And the results disturbed and astonished him. Ha ha ha. You have realized. Broly said, sticking out for his students' achievements, which also became his own achievements. He is right, his ki is impressive, but it's not as high as the one of that saiyan women. However, they are on an equal footing, or even he is being superior, Ten Shinhan said, appreciating the impressive and mysterious but imperceptible ability that Gohan was showing to the world. Broly, does this have anything to do with the power you gave him that you told us about before? Asked Krillin, who was obviously interested in that useful passive ability. Of course, and unlike others he uses it in front of his teacher as a sign of respect. It is a combination of the ki that everyone uses and another type of vital energy manifestation with which only I was born, the first to manifest it in all the universes, and that now it's also part of Gohan thanks to my surgical intervention. A reward for having passed one of my exams. The Nen. A mystical power that not only improves all the capacities of the individual who possesses it in similar ways, although somewhat differently from ki, it also gives you the possibility to create your own ability, with certain restrictions. And once ki and nen are united, a new power is created, one that amplifies all abilities to inconceivable levels without the need to increase internal energy. The Kaioshin. Broly said as he used the abilities of his formless realm to make parts of his body disappear and make them reappear in various directions and positions to demonstrate the wonders of the Nen Kaioshin. Without increasing the body's internal energy. Incredible. I see, that's why I felt that his ability and power didn't correspond at all with his ki level, said Mutant Rashi, who now understood why despite feeling that Gohan's ki was lower than Gohan's he was equal or more powerful in raw power and speed. That's right, unlike Piccolo I have focused more on improving Gohan's energy quality rather than quantity. It is better to start as soon as possible, when you have little internal energy and therefore it is easier for you to control and adapt both power systems. And avoid bad habits in the future, Broly said, explaining part of the reasons why his favorite student's combat power wasn't as high as it should be after that arduous training. A unique ability? Like one of those Broly gave us? Krillin asked Piccolo, since he knew that if he asked Broly about an ability he would quickly be offended as before because he didn't use the one he gave him in combat. No, not like yours. From what I heard, everyone develops their own ability with a very complex criteria. A skill that has to be created based on your personality, training in various categories, certain innate characteristics that are verified with a water glass and a leaf. Don't ask me anymore. I have no idea what kind of skill Gohan has created or how that power works. And that worries me. Said Piccolo, who was uneasy about the kind of weird lifelong ability that a powerful but pampered 5-year-old boy may have created. And before Yam could put into practice the information that his partner Vegeta had given him or could have paid attention to what the Z warriors were saying about their combat. Why do you fight? Gohan asked to Yam very seriously. Hey! What stupidity are you asking? Yam said, which expressed the general opinion of almost everyone who could heard this question in this precise moment. I just want to know. Said Gohan, who couldn't get his master's words out of his head, and before continuing with fight, believed that he could learn something by asking directly. Because your dear teacher is forcing us all. Happy with my answer? Yam replied rudely, since if it weren't because Broly had kidnapped her and the others in the same planet they had come to exterminate, they would have fled with their tails between their legs long ago. But obviously that wasn't the information that would help him solve Broly's special surprise test, so he asked again in a more concrete way, I don't mean that. I mean, why do you fight? Why do you fight against others? Why did you come here to fight us? And upon hearing once again Gohan's question, which she found stupid as well as impertinent, and in Yam's opinion even offensive coming from Gohan. Is it necessary to ask? We are Saiyans. We are the quintessential warrior race. We were born and live to fight. What other reason do you need? Yam yelled, lecturing Gohan, as if he were some kind of silly kid with no knowledge that only asks absurd questions for what were empirically proven and logical themes. Fighting for fighting. Killing for killing. Why were you born of one race or another? That's stupid. This doesn't have any sense. Shouted Gohan, who was seriously offended by hearing that insult to his intelligence and to his value system, the one who had taught him, understood, believes and defends. His childish kindness and innocence prevented him from believing that someone, that an entire race could believe in something so barbaric and inhuman, a race to which he partly belonged. Stupid. Ha 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 ha. Pathetic. It seems that half Saiyans have no warrior pride, especially if they are the son and student of a traitor. Scum like you will never understand the pleasure and glory of bathing in the blood of those whom you have massacred. You will never understand the pride of being a Saiyan. Shouted Yam, who exposed word for word the fanatical warmongering speech of the planet Vegeta, devised by the Vegeta family and that had been instilled in all Saiyans since their childhood, especially the strongest ones. And hearing all this ideological pamphlet devised by a true psychopath, Gohan felt disgusted. So much so that he even began to feel self-conscious about belonging to that race. As if he was internalizing the sins and failed way of living that part of his race had, as if those actions were also his fault. Now I understand why there is so much sexual tension between those two. They are both warmonger fanatics, Broly thought, feeling proud that his plan had worked in a mysterious and stupid way. And besides that, don't insult my father and my teacher. Monster. Screamed Gohan, who was extremely pissed off, largely because Yam's fascist speech, but above all because she had verbally assaulted two of their loved ones. Bomb. What was that? Yam screamed when she saw the great explosion of energy that Gohan's anger and scream had caused around her. His power is increasing, Vegeta said with great concern as he continued to watch the battle with the tracker in his eye, until it exploded too. Did you also find glorious and that your friends were murdered? Gohan shouted with more anger than before, remembering how they killed those who from the point of view of Gohan, must have been the loved ones of Yam and Vegeta. And when he finished speaking, he advanced at high speed towards Yam with his fist raised. And he thrashed her with a very punch to her body. Boom! Punch that Yam, despite almost leaving the ring due to the impact, was able to block with both arms. Those weren't my friends. They were only indignal slag. Yam yelled, feeling a little upset by what she was saying, thinking, and feeling. But she was a fanatic who was brainwashed from her tender childhood. Therefore, her fanaticism and doublethink prevailed over everything else. Gohan shouted without moving as he gathered even more Kaien into his body. Yam! Quick! Use that, or that fucking brat will put you in serious trouble, shouted Vegeta yelled, who was starting to have a really bad feeling. Aw! Yelled Gohan, which continued with the typical Dragon Ball scream. Do that? But if I do that, he will also be affected. Yam yelled, starting to recede due to atmospheric pressure. Yelled Gohan, who had almost finished increasing his power. It's a big risk, but it can also be an opportunity. If he hasn't learned to control himself, I can win, Yam thought as she began to create a strange blue energy sphere in his hand. Broly Senii. I think I understand now. I'll show you. I'll show you that you're wrong. Gohan shouted after finishing gathering almost all the Kaien he was reserving inside. With eyes full of determination. Broly Senii. I think I understand now. I'll show you. I'll show you that you're wrong. Gohan shouted after finishing gathering almost all the Kaien he was reserving inside. With eyes full of determination. And Yam, who noticed the great danger she was in, didn't think twice and prepared to launch an energy sphere. Watch out, Gohan. What? Krillin shouted when he saw that Yam wanted to use a suspicious shiny blue sphere. An energy attack that resembled the Sokoden of Yamcha's, which could potentially catch Gohan off guard. However, immediately he was surprised to see that Yam hadn't launched the sphere against Gohan, but to the sky, where it expanded and exploded, creating a great glow that remained in the air as if it were a powerful lamp. And without wasting a second, Yam quickly looked at the light she created. "What's that?" asked Ten Shinhan, who didn't understand what Yam intended to do with that kind of giant light bulb in the sky. But quickly some of them understood what was happening. They had some doubts at first, but when Yam's eyes reddened, started to have muscle spasms and grow. They understood that what they feared so much was happening right now. "From the reaction on your faces, I can see that you know what will happen next." Hee hee. "That's right, this is the power ball. A sphere of condensed blood waves that simulates a full moon. And we Saiyans transform into a giant berserker monkey when seeing the full moon, a monkey with 10 times more power than our base form. Yam is a well-trained upper-class warrior, and that's why he knows how to retain her sanity on that transformation. But, will it be the same for that kid? Will he be able to use any of his refined techniques being a powerful but idiot crazy monkey?" Vegeta said, who protected his eyes to prevent himself from transforming. "Oh. No. Gohan. Don't look up." Krillin, Yamcha and Mutant Rashi shouted, as they remembered the dire consequences of someone turning into a mad Oozuru. And amidst that great tension. "Oh, it's very bright," said Broly, who began to look at the power ball as if he were in a trance, while his long tail danced happily in the air. And the instant he said that, something strange began to happen to Broly's body. He was also transforming. "Oh no. Broly, don't look." They all screamed in horror. An atrocious and deep fear that they had never before been able to feel or believe that could exist. If someone like Broly, who was practically a god among ants, lost his reason and his power multiplied by 10, what would happen to the world? No, it wasn't just his planet anymore. What happened to the whole universe? And before more than one suffered an embolism, buried their head in the ground or proposed a collective suicide. "Hee hee, just kidding. I'm fine," Broly said, returning his body and expression to his normal state while looking at his companions, putting an innocent and angelic face. And obviously in a funny and exaggerated way, almost everyone fell to the ground, as it used to be with all the 80s anime characters. "Don't joke with that. This almost gave us a heart attack." Everyone screamed at the same time with so much anger that the veins in their heads swelled. "Ha ha ha ha, sorry, I couldn't help it. Come on guys. Did you really believe that I would become a mindless monkey with unlimited power? If something like this had ever happened, this universe would have already been destroyed years ago. Obviously, I created countermeasures for this decades ago. And of course I couldn't allow Gohan to transform into a kaiju eater," Broly said as he held back the enraged crowd who wanted to rip his eyes out, and watched what his student was doing. And in Broly's ring, Yam had completed her transformation. She had transformed into a giant monkey with saiyan armor and skirt that practically covered the entire ring due to its large size. And in a sinister way, that monkey spoke. "What's wrong now, boy? Will you be able to show me that now?" Yam Oozuru said while looking at Gohan from above with arrogance and satisfaction. Yam knew this was his last chance. And although it could pose a risk to her, it wasn't a very critical one. In the event that Gohan, like her, was able to maintain his rationality in Oozuru form, the combat wouldn't change so much. At best, the only thing that would happen is that she would have some hope of winning by having more experience using this transformation. At worst, she would end up losing in the same way, since the multiplier of Gohan must be x10 just like hers. But in the case that Gohan didn't know how to maintain his rationality, the situation could improve exponentially. If he transformed into an Oozuru berserker, he would surely be unable to use the sophisticated techniques with which he was leading this battle. He would just shoot fire through his mouth indiscriminately and hit everything in his way without meaning. And if, on the other hand, Gohan forced himself not to look at the power ball either by closing his eyes or by not looking up, which would be incredibly difficult since she had become a giant monkey, and if he only looked down, it would be impossible to fight properly. And either with one condition or another, it would be her victory. However, there was a possibility that neither she nor Vegeta had in mind. "I am going to show you that you are wrong. And besides that," Gohan yelled as he looked at the power ball without any fear. And before the astonished eyes of some and scared of others, Gohan also began to transform. His body began to grow, his muscles inflated and brown hair grew all over his body in a massive way. However, he wasn't transformed into an Oozuru. This is the true Saiyan transformation. An ability discovered by the traitorous Saiyan you mentioned earlier, Gohan True Saiyan said as he looked fiercely at Yam. And obviously everyone overreacted to that incredibly cool transformation, which by the whims of fate is still not canon in the official Dragon Ball universe. But it is and always will be in our hearts. Wow! What the hell is this form? Everyone screamed as they witnessed the great visual impact of that transformation, in addition to the powerful ki that Gohan released, which had become 10 times stronger. But greater was the amazement of Yam and Vegeta, who felt as if a bomb had exploded in their brains once again that day. What the hell is this form? How is it possible? What? However, the most excessive reaction didn't take place on that battlefield. Came house. My son has transformed into a caveman. Son, I'm going now. I will save you. And then I will punish you for life. Shouted Chi-Chi, who had gone totally insane, then smashed the television with her fist and tried to leave the Kame house to grab her vehicle, and march like a kamikaze towards the battlefield. And obviously her father tried to stop her, but without much success. Calm Shishi. Luckily, I brought another television, said Bulma, who remained inside the Kame house with Oolong and the others as she released one of her capsules. Back to the battlefield. Yam was still confused and catatonic in her Oozuru form due to see Gohan's unknown transformation. She was unable to continue admiring it. Child, how the hell have you? Boom. Gwaj. But Gohan didn't explain, he just accelerated his small body, which was only a few centimeters bigger but 10 times faster to hit the giant Yam with a powerful headbutt. A headbutt so powerful that it caused her to vomit a little, in addition to getting up from the ground due to the great power of that human projectile attack. Pam. 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 If a true saiyan is what you say, I prefer a million times be a fake one. Gohan shouted, who continued hitting his huge hairy body after his successful headbutt. Gwa. Oozuru Yam yelled, which created an energy explosion around her to push Gohan away from her body. Bomb. An invisible ki blast that didn't harm Gohan at all, but got the effect Yam wanted. Push him away enough to hit him with his huge hand like a fly. FLAF. And as if Gohan was a butterfly, he nimbly dodged that swat, moving quickly close to her face. Palm. And as if he were an elephant, he hit Yam's face hard with a kick, sending Yam's huge body out of the ring. Fresh. Is this looking fun to you? Is this looking glorious to you? Are you enjoying it? I don't. Screamed Gohan, which stayed in the air as he watched Yam try to get up again. Shut up, microbe. I'm going to crush you, Yam yelled as she stood up and released a burst of fire from her mouth towards Gohan's. And covering himself with a Kaien barrier, Gohan advanced through the fire towards Yam to fight hand-to-hand again. Omega Storm. Gohan shouted as he created a barrage of Kaien spheres, which hit Yam's huge and easy-to-hit body. Gumum. 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 Bomb. Boom. Ah. Yam yelled, who tried to ignore the impacts and pain to hit Gohan with a powerful right punch. Palm. Punch that finally hit Gohan. Palm. But that didn't harm him too much, since he quickly answered it with another one. And as Gohan and Yam fought, Yam being the one overwhelmed by the agility of Gohan's small body, Vegeta began to ramble. That strange transformation. Is that kid the legendary Super Saiyan? No. It is impossible. According to legend, the Super Saiyan had blonde hair and green eyes. I get it, it must be another kind of transformation. And Broly, also transforming into true Saiyan, began to explain his first transformation history, context, and other contents. This is the transformation of true Saiyan. A transformation I created when I left the filthy planet Vegeta. A transformation where the Oozuru transformation is compressed into your normal height. With this you get the x10 power multiplier that the Oozuru transformation grants, but without the great disadvantages of that transformation, which are the lack of agility resulting from trying to move such a large and heavy body. Huge and heavy body that makes you an easy target for all attacks, especially long-ranged ones. And on top of that there is the handicap of increased defensive capacity, since the density of a true Saiyan's body is much higher than normal due to compression by the Oozuru on a tiny body. Such a transformation is possible. Do you also need a surgical operation to do that? Vegeta asked, who for more than obvious reasons had a great interest in the abilities of Broly that Gohan exhibited, like the Kaien. But most of all the true Saiyan transformation, which was an impressive trait that belonged to his race. No, it is not necessary. With having saiyan tail, a little talent and my method, anyone can use this transformation. A method with which it is also not necessary to have a full moon to transform, said Broly, who answered Vegeta's doubts with pleasure. There was nothing wrong with boasting about his techniques. Really? What is that method? Tell me. Vegeta shouted, who due to greed forgot the position he was in and returned to his usual attitude of despised and capricious despot. I haven't heard you say please. And better forget about it. I will not give anything to an enemy. But who knows, perhaps I could explain my method with one of the individual wishes that I promised you if you won your matches, Broly said, trying to camouflage the malevolent smile. Malevolent smile that grew more sinister with each word, venom-laden words directly directed at Vegeta's mind. Phrases that aimed to stimulate the greed of the already greedy Vegeta. Win. Vegeta muttered with bloodshot eyes. Boom. And after a minute and a half of combat, the winner had already been practically decided. Palm. Ish, Yam yelled, who had been sent to fly once more, shit, and tried to get up. Yam was quite hurt. There were burns almost all over her body, she had several broken ribs and multiple bruises, her muscles were almost torn and had lost a lot of blood. The only reason she was still conscious was because of her insensitivity to pain that she had acquired during decades of massacres and because of her excessive pride that prevented her from stopping fighting. Surrender. You've lost, said Gohan, who barely only had some scratches and burned hair. State in which compared to Yam's, clearly showed who had the advantage. And feeling as if the fight was already decided, he landed on the ground and walked slowly towards Yam, who was still kneeling but trying to get up. Surrender. You've lost, said Gohan, who barely only had some scratches and burned hair. State in which compared to Yam's, clearly showed who had the advantage. Feeling as if the fight was already decided, he landed on the ground and walked slowly towards Yam, who was still kneeling but trying to get up. And seeing how the hairy but small body of Gohan walked triumphantly towards her, which very wounded tried to lift her hairy but huge body starting with her knee. Her pride was brutally hurt. It was as if she had knelt before him. It was as if she was admitting her defeat and asked for mercy. And she would involuntarily recognize that this brat and everything he stood for was superior to her. Shut. I will never give up. I will never admit my defeat before a lower-class warrior son of an unworthy exiled who lost to his useless brother. I refuse to lose to a naive child who denies his saiyan heritage. Yam yelled and was still struggling to get up, but gradually managed to accomplish it. Why did you say my father is unworthy? Gohan asked, who despite being angry at those words, he didn't externalize that rage. Instead he showed coldness and tranquility. The tranquility and coldness that someone feels when faces someone knowing that the situation is fully controlled both physically and mentally. Something strange in a primary school boy who is facing a talking giant monkey that shoots fire from the mouth. It is not obvious. Your father lost against the unworthy of your uncle, which makes him more than unworthy. Yam said, trying to buy time to get up and regain energy, without missing the opportunity to spread the doctrine of Vegeta and his family. That bald man was also unworthy as that guy over there says. Gohan asked once again with the same attitude as before, but a little more apathetic, as if it was no longer possible for him to be angry at what Yam could say. And because of that question. Yam hesitated a little, but quickly answered, convinced that what she was about to say was what she really thought before and now. Yes, of course. And without Yam barely having time to finish his sentence, Gohan practically sentenced the whole discussion with another simple question, and is your sister also unworthy? And with that question, Yam's mind was completely clouded, she didn't know what to think or what to say. That question had collapsed the largest pillars that formed her existence. The saiyan ideology on which her way of life was built, and her sister, the most important person for her in her life, a part of herself. A question that brutally crashed into her ideology, an ideology in the form of a glass statue in the shape of King Vegeta, a statue that was beginning to crack. Despite her fanaticism, she couldn't bear such blatant double-thinking without realizing that she was contradicting herself. Oj. Yam babbled as she tried to solve that cruel paradox and express some answer, without success. Gohan started with his check and there was little chance that he wouldn't take that opportunity to end up with a real checkmate. Your sister is weaker than the huge bald man. And she has also lost. Gohan said condescendingly when he saw Yam's state, but especially imagining how she would be at the end of the question. Don't say it, Yam thought before her mind could even imagine what Gohan was going to say. But her intuition prophesied that the next question could be the last question that that she currently knew would hear. Is she unworthy too? However, you seemed very concerned about her recently. It was as if you really loved her. As if you loved her, like me, an outcast and shame for the Science loves her mother, father, grandfather, Broly-sensei and Piccolo-san. Would you kill her? Gohan said, increasing the volume of his voice due to the anger he felt now. He was angry to see how Yam was trying to trick her own feelings and beliefs into to make them fit in another contradictory ones. She was trying to deny the feelings that he considered the most important, so much so that even hurt him to see how his rival still tried to doubt about them. But he understood that maybe that wasn't her fault. Since those feelings had been obscured by a horrible and ruthless way of thinking that was instilled in her from her childhood. And that now they were beginning to clear up. With great pain, the pain of feeling that you have been wrong all your life, despite having the truth in front of your eyes all the time. Shut up. Shut up. Shut up. Shut up. Don't say anything else. Don't ask me anything else. Don't make me wonder about anything else. Thought Yam, who was beginning to cry due to the emotional and mental pain she was feeling, as if something was going to break inside her. And if you lose against me, would you also be unworthy? Since you would have been defeated by an unworthy being, son of another unworthy being. Would you commit suicide? Would you kill your unworthy sister and then commit suicide? Or do you want we be the ones to kill her when we take her out of that jar? Is that what you want? Answer. Gohan said, who was about to cry too because of how painful was for him to say those cruel things at that moment. That moment when with great empathy understood that he had made a great checkmate. Yam cried out in tears, gathering all strength, rage, frustration, and pain into one emotional, explosive, and desperate last punch towards the enemy who knew that she would be incapable of defeating him anyway. An enemy that until now she had belittled. Slash. Boom. And in a quick flash Yam's giant punch smashed the ground, raising a large curtain of dust that prevented everyone from seeing the result of that last confrontation. And after that smoke screen dissipated, what was seen was Yam's huge body still kneeling on the ground, holding the full weight of her giant body on her right arm, which sank into the ground, creating a large crater due to her final attack. And behind her Gohan, who held in his hand a giant ape tail that gradually shrunk, in the same way that Yam did. Since that was Yam's tail, which had been cut off by Gohan in that last quick and flashy attack. Thus ending the Oozuru transformation. Damn! You couldn't win either. Yam? Vegeta yelled with great anger seeing that even Yam had lost, this being the first time he really regretted the defeat of an ally. And due to that forced detransformation along with the physical, mental and emotional damage that she had suffered during the combat. Yam staggered, her vision blurred and began to lose consciousness. And she would have fallen to the ground and been completely defeated if it weren't because... Plaf. The fight is not over yet, Broly-sensei, said Gohan, who held the unconscious Yam before she fell to the ground and looked at his teacher with great seriousness and determination. He wasn't joking at all. And Broly, after inspecting what his student would do in the future with his multiple abilities, once again, nodded and said with a smile, as you say. However, don't do anything pervert. Everyone is watching. Bad joke directed at a kindergarten kid, technically, that everyone tried hard to ignore. But, what are you doing, Gohan? You've already won. Krillin asked Gohan, acting as the representative of the whole world right now. Dwarf bastard, what are you trying to do now? Screamed Vegeta, very outraged upon see that Gohan hadn't had enough to beat Yam and mentally drive her crazy, now he also possibly intended to humiliate her in a different way. Siege, as soft and cowardly as ever. He has grown strong and we have barely managed to instill some courage in him, but he still lacks the most important quality of a warrior. Kill your enemies. Damn. How many times do I have to repeat that? Piccolo screamed hysterically as he scolded Gohan from a distance, and he also scolded Broly from close proximity, almost spitting in his face. Releasing all the frustration that had accumulated over the years regarding this matter. What? He cannot kill anyone. Well, it's understandable, he's just a child. Krillin and the others said, but despite finding that this was a big problem if they needed to defeat the present and future threats coming from space, they understood that couldn't demand so much to a toddler. Hahaha, calm down Piccolo, don't be so sadistic. Not everything in life is killing. Look at me, I have never killed anyone and I am still the greatest warrior of all, Broly answered with great calm and joy, as if there were no problem with his teaching methods. For the last time. I don't believe you haven't killed anyone. And you spoil him too much. Doesn't matter how much you manipulate him so that he doesn't have fear or doubts if you have to deal with enemies. If he is unable to kill them, everything is useless. He will always be a fucking mollycoddle thanks to you. Piccolo yelled once more, but this time much angrier than before due to Broly's carefree demeanor with something that he found so important. You may be right, but... Don't be so sure about that, Broly replied, this time with great seriousness, creating a great contrast to what he had said and done previously. And while the public and the support team were still arguing about the controversial case of the toddler who didn't like to kill people because he found it unmoral, Yam woke up, in Gohan's small arms, something she didn't like at all. What are you doing? Move away. I don't need your stupid compassion. Yam yelled at the same time she pushed Gohan away from her, although she fell back to the ground, her legs felt very heavy due to the accumulated damage. Aish. I just wanted to be nice, Gohan grumbled due to Yam's bad manners. But he didn't fight back, he just stood in front of her without saying anything else. And that bothered and confused her. What the hell was he doing? What do you want now? Laugh at me? Remind me that you have beaten me despite everything I've said? Do you want me to apologize? Do you want me to say I was wrong? Yam asked Gohan angrily, she couldn't think of any other reason why Gohan would have waited for her to wake up. It would be nice if you did. But that's not why I held you down. I just wanted to wait for you to wake up to say that. I surrender, Gohan said calmly as he deactivated his true Saiyan transformation. Although Gohan said it very calmly, as if he didn't give it too much importance. Obviously this unforeseen and even pointless statement created a huge overreaction among allies, enemies, and even local spectators. K. Everyone screamed completely stunned, including Vegeta and Yam, except for Broly. They were speechless and overheating every neuron and gray matter in their brains to understand this incoherent decision. Until someone broke that awkward silence. He hasn't only not killed his enemy. The enemy that hasn't stopped insulting him and his father. The enemy who has come here to massacre us. And he lets her win. He lets her win when he had already won. Fuck. This is. Piccolo yelled with great rage and pain, so much so that started to hyperventilate and even fell to the ground, where repeatedly hit the ground with his head. And while the others looked at Piccolo with great concern and amazement, since they had never imagined that he could do something like that. The most affected by this decision asked. And not peacefully, since she felt terribly insulted. You, FGBD, why are you? Hey. What the FK is happening? One more time. Yam shouted because of the great fury that contempt and insult. However, she suddenly shifted from focusing on Gohan and his insulting surrender to worrying about something very strange that was happening to herself. Yam, what's wrong with you? Vegeta said, who was pleased to have achieved the first victory despite the conditions in which it had been achieved, while he approached Yam, which was behaving in a strange and worrying way. And just as Vegeta approached Yam, Gohan approached his team to receive his compliments. Broly Senior. I have done well. Gohan asked shyly as he watched Piccolo depressed and furious. That depends on what you have learned, Broly replied with the composure of a Jedi Master. I think. I've learned that there are many other things to fight for besides protecting your loved ones. Like defending my ideals, preventing someone from doing evil, stopping someone before they do something stupid, leading them on the right path. They are also noble motives. There are many reasons to fight, and not be afraid of conflict. That's right. You passed. As living beings, it is in our nature to fight against others, and despite the fact that we must ask ourselves when we should fight or why it is worth fighting, we cannot hesitate when the moment of fighting knocks on our door. Especially when an enemy breaks your door and threatens to kill you. Use violence. Don't hesitate, Gohan. Fight with all your might, kick their asses and tell who taught you how to kick asses with such elegance and forcefulness. Broly said, which went from an educational message to a philosophical one, from a philosophical message to a belligerent one, and from a belligerent message to an advertising one. Yes, Broly Senior, I will never fear or hesitate to fight again at 100% of my power, although I still don't like it too much. Even if my mother punishes me later. Gohan replied with enthusiasm and determination, although with some fear when mentioning his mother. I hope so, Gohan. I am very proud of you. And with this I have managed from his tender childhood to end the moral dilemmas that prevented him from fighting 100% and killing a cruel and ruthless monster that had killed millions of people and intended to destroy the world. Yes, very absurd, but it happened. C16, the muscular, robotic being of light we all love will not have to sacrifice himself this time, Broly said and thought very pleased with himself for his great educational work. And what's the point in fighting against a dangerous threat if you don't finish that threat? Screamed Piccolo, who continued to hyperventilate as he felt increasingly helpless seeing that his teachings failed to reach Gohan's mind. Piccolo-san, calm down. Gohan said, worried and feeling guilty for the stress he was causing in his substitute teacher. Gohan, why did you give up? Yamcha asked, who as the biggest loser of the day and saga didn't understand why someone would renounce to the sweet taste of victory. It wasn't necessary for me to win. We have already fulfilled our objective, the Earth will be saved because we have won 4 of 6 confrontations. If she makes a wish to have one, Broly Senior would never grant her anything dangerous to us or evil. This way that guy won't be mad at her. Besides, I feel a little sorry for her, Gohan said, exposing the reasons for his surrender to the rest of the Z warriors. Are you sure it wasn't because she's a woman and you like her? Hee. Unlike your father, you are very advanced for your age. But Gohan, she is too old for you. Mutant Rossi said, who was still in his perverted mode after the previous fight. Don't say stupid things. Gohan, I understand what you are saying, but even if he does nothing to us today, maybe another day when Broly is not here, he will kill us all. I know it is hard, but we must end the problem from the root. Being kind to your enemy is being cruel to yourself, said Krillin, who years later would do the opposite of what he says now to save a sexy evil android. Don't worry about it, Krillin, she won't do anything wrong again, Gohan said, very convinced that what he said was 100% true. Hey. What do you mean? Asked Krillin, who didn't understand where that dazzling confidence came from. You. BD. What the FK have you done to me? What have you done to my head? What have you done to my voice? Why can't I insult? Yam screamed terrified when she realized that she was unable to control her own actions. It was as if something was manipulating her brain. And that something was undoubtedly Gohan's fault. That's because good kids shouldn't swear, Gohan replied simply and even almost obvious and innocent, when the implications of his words were more terrifying and relevant than anyone could imagine. Flashback. Form Realm. Well Gohan, now that you have mastered the 10, the Zetsu, the Ren and their advanced combinations Gyo, In, En, Shu, Ko, Ken and Ryu, now you have to learn the last and most important of all. The Hatsu. With which you can develop your own Kin skill, Broly said to Gohan with great enthusiasm, materializing a glass of water with a leaf in the middle. Create my own skill. So cool. But what do you need that glass for? Gohan said and asked with enthusiasm and confusion. There are 6 types of aura. Every individual is born having one of these 6 different aura types: Enhancer, Transmuter, Emitter, Conjurer, Manipulator, and the most incredible and special one, the Specialist. You just have to put your hands around the glass and use Ren. Depending on the reaction in the glass, you will belong to one of those categories, and from there we will be able to see the best way to create your ability, Broly said to indicate to his student to proceed with the water divination ritual. You are a specialist, right? Gohan asked for obvious reasons, and later he tried to make sure he was doing it correctly, is that so? And in a few seconds, the leaf inside the glass began to move from one side to the other as if it were in a turbine. Oh, just as I thought. You are a manipulator. Those in this category can control living or non-living things. The main advantage of this category in combat is the ability to manipulate the enemy themselves, a very interesting one, because it's near the specialist category. Broly said, very pleased to be right as he explained Gohan to the category he belonged. Control others? But that is wrong. I don't like manipulation. And why did you say you suspected I was a manipulator? It's not funny. Gohan said that as a good boy he didn't like the idea of manipulating other people, and he obviously hated being called a manipulator or that someone expects him to be a manipulator. Hahaha. There's nothing wrong with manipulating bad people. In addition, there are many types of applications to use manipulation in hectic and non-violent ways. And the reason I thought you were manipulative is because of your personality. The manipulators are argumentative and logical, advance at their own pace and tend to want to keep their families and loved ones safe. On the other hand, when it comes to pursuing their own goals, they don't listen to what others might have to say about it. Exactly like you. You are logical, difficult to teach, you care about your loved ones and it doesn't matter what everyone tells you or happen in your life. You always say that you want to be a great scientist, Broly said, explaining to his student why neither his category was bad nor evil and that the reason he believed he was a manipulator was not bad either. And after understanding that being manipulative was perhaps not a bad thing based on what Broly had told him, Gohan asked more about this topic. And how do I create my ability? By the way, what is your ability? And of course Broly had no problem explaining to him with practical examples how his primal ability worked. You want some reference? Okay. I am a specialist, the rarest, OP and ambiguous category of all, but since it is close to yours in the hexagon that I showed you, it has similarities with your category. My ability at first was an alternate space created with Kaien where time didn't exist and where I could leave everything inside without being affected by the passage of time, get inside to avoid attacks, go out in a different location where I have put part of that dimension and most important of all, leaving evil people trapped inside without killing them. Your teacher, like you, also hates killing people. What? Really? Are you the same as me? Gohan shouted with great enthusiasm due to the joy he felt knowing that there was someone close to him, like his sensei, the strongest person he knows, who shared the same type of ideology or sensibilities. Yes Gohan, but since I am older than you, in any case you are just like me, ha ha ha. Anyway, that's why you have to take into account your tastes, motivations, personality, way of acting, your subconscious and obviously your Nin category to make your ability as compatible as possible with you and therefore more powerful and efficient. I know it is difficult for a child, but is a must. As well as thinking about the activation conditions or restrictions that you will impose on yourself to make your ability more powerful. Of course, to manipulate someone or something in some way. If your ability goes out of that branch you will be wasting your potential and putting yourself in danger. For more questions you can consult the PDF that I'll send you later, Broly said, giving several tips and indications for the creation of his Hatsu. This is hard. But I think I have an idea of what kind of power I want. One that doesn't kill people and make this world a better place. Although I will need a little time to think about everything. And I still don't like it too much, Gohan said, who began to think very seriously about what kind of ability he could create with the favorable conditions Broly had explained to him. I knew you would say something like that. You go at your own pace, like a manipulator would do. He, said Broly, who as usual always continued with the jokes when he saw that someone was bothered by them. Broly Senii. Stop saying that I'm a manipulator. I don't like how it sounds. Gohan protested, looking at his sensei with teary eyes, since the little explanation of how respectable the manipulators are couldn't banish the negative meanings associated with that word from Gohan's brain. Oh. Look at that weeping face. You're trying to manipulate me emotionally, right? That's perfect. Practice your new vocation. Ha 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 ha, Broly said, continuing the joke while stroking Gohan's head. And Gohan, annoyed and resigned by his sensei's jokes, huffed and continued thinking about his future new skill. In the present. Planet Earth. You. BD. What the FK have you done to me? What have you done to my head? What have you done to my voice? Why can't I insult? Yam screamed terrified when she realized that she was unable to control her own actions. It was as if something was manipulating her brain. And that something was undoubtedly Gohan's fault. That's because good kids shouldn't swear, Gohan replied simply and even almost obvious and innocent, when the implications of his words were more terrifying and relevant than anyone could imagine. What the FK does that mean? Yam yelled as she pointed his hand at Gohan with the intention of launching a key attack to him. An attack to release all his frustration and demand specific answers from Gohan through violence. But, nothing came out of Yam's palm. It was as if something was preventing her from attacking Gohan. Yam, what are you doing? Vegeta said, who for a moment felt the murderous intent in Yam's voice and actions, but moments later they completely disappeared in an unnatural way. What? What is happening to me? Yam said, very terrified, so much so that every trace of pride, arrogance and violence was replaced by a deep despair. This is my student Gohan's, be a good kid, Kaien skill. A skill that is activated by knocking someone unconscious, that he wins in a match or competition according to the pre-established rules agreed between him and his target or if his victim decides to surrender. It is a somewhat difficult and stupid condition, since it doesn't help in combat, but it is very effective and powerful considering the difficulty of fulfilling that condition and because his user doesn't like to fight, another added difficulty for Gohan that makes his ability more powerful. Ability whose effect is to manipulate that person to be a good child in accordance with what his mother has told him that a good child must behave and some of his own beliefs. Yes, his scrupulous mother has over-influenced his personality. And of course it eliminates the inconvenience that he doesn't like to kill motherfuckers like you, something that will make Piccolo a little happy. You see, you don't always have to kill people to give them a fate worse than death. In short, you can already forget to swear, do harm to third parties if they haven't done anything wrong to you, and among other things conquer planets, of course. Broly said, explaining instead of Gohan the ability of his student in excessive detail to the delight of everyone. The evangelizing power that every protagonist shonen needs and should have. But this one least has a logical basis with Gohan, Broly thought as he remembered a blonde ninja from another anime he previously visited whose evangelizations had no logic whatsoever. Thank you for telling everyone about my ability. I thought it was a secret that you could only trust to your best friends, and never spread them in front of your enemies. Much less to the Wola world. Gohan replied, pointing at the television camera. He wasn't only upset that Broly explained his ability, and was also extremely offended by the personal evaluations of him, his ability and his personality, although deep down he knew that Broly was only joking, maybe. Does it matter? Your ability only activates when you have defeated someone. Why should matter to your enemy to find out what skill you have or don't have in combat if you can't use it until you win the fucking combat? You better start developing your, be a good kid, to be more efficient and to use it in battle or you will be wasting your ability, said Broly, who wasn't very happy with such a simple and unhelpful ability in battle. However, he couldn't expect much from a small child either, but luckily he had given him some advice to develop his skill later to add more functions. I don't even like my ability at all. I still think that manipulating like this isn't right. Gohan said, trying to excuse himself. And while Broly and Gohan were discussing about his Kaien ability and how to improve it. It's a very childish ability, but with this Gohan's kindness will no longer be a problem in a fight, and we may even win allies in this way. Right, Piccolo? Mutant Rashi said, looking at Piccolo, who until a few moments ago was very worried, furious and even hysterical about Gohan's great defect. So Mutant Rashi believed that after seeing that ability he would feel relieved. Or that's what he believed. This ability is terrifying. I can't let Gohan use it against me. From now on I think I will have to avoid doing training bouts with him. Or else, Piccolo thought, drenched in cold sweat, imagining what might have happened in any of the matches he had with Gohan if he had been knocked out by him. He couldn't stop shaking at the thought of that possibility. And if Piccolo was terrified of that, how was Yam currently? No. 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 Yam yelled desperately and insanely as she tried to launch key attacks against everyone in her sight. But it was useless. She was unable to attack anyone. She wasn't even able to charge against the cameras to destroy their heads with a punch. She couldn't even hit the ground to vent her pain. Even her right to make a fuss and scream had been denied. Since this wasn't the behavior that a good kid should have. But she wasn't the only one who was suffering in that situation. You're fucking dwarf. Undo what you have done to her right now. Vegeta yelled, very angry as he faced Gohan. And due to this fury he was about to go into combat if necessary for Gohan to fulfill his demands. Vegeta at this point in history, both in the official version and in this world altered by Broly's appearance, was a cruel, self-centered, selfish and despicable being. He only thought of himself and how to get more power to be at the top of the food pyramid, dethroning Frieza and rule the universe, the ambition his father had instilled in him since he was a child. For him everyone was just an instrument to reach that goal, the goal of being the most powerful warrior in the universe. And this would continue to be the case with everyone if it weren't for one detail. In this life, Yam, a powerful and competent scion woman, had been fighting with him for decades. A strong, intelligent, serious, with character, as all scions like, useful, reliable, attractive woman and with the same moral values that he had. In the official version of Dragon Ball until then Vegeta hadn't had contact, or at least serious and prolonged contact, with women, even less with a woman with these characteristics. His goals remained the same, but he was still a living being with reproductive instincts at the best age for it. It was inevitable that in Vegeta's ruthless heart something would propel him to mate and protect what was possibly the only worthy scion woman with whom to continue his royal descent. The most powerful warrior family in the universe, and with which to continue ruling until the end of time with someone with the same name. Vegeta. And now that ideal woman had been destroyed and stripped of the greatest hallmark that a scion, from his point of view, could have. Something that was very important not only for Yam, also for Vegeta. their wickedness and capacity for violence. And that was something he couldn't bear. It was something worse than death. Something that had hurt his pride individually and collectively. Vegeta. Kill me, please, said Yam, who still knelt on the ground without looking up. She spoke in a hoarse and muffled voice, devoid of all the confidence, pride and strength that characterized her. What? Vegeta stammered, very stunned. He was still facing Gohan and didn't expect Yam to ask him for something like that. He hadn't even been able to process that message. Please. Kill me. Please. Yam said with great pain and disgust as she raised her gaze from the ground towards Vegeta. A look full of despair and sadness, but at the same time full of determination. And immediately Vegeta replied with concern, wait, Yam. Kill me. Do what you did with the others. I'm not worthy of being a saiyan anymore. I am even less worthy than the others. I have no value. Please. I'm even forced to say, please, every time I ask for something. End this. Please. Yam pleaded with her watery eyes to Vegeta one more time with more pain and determination than before. She was completely determined to die if the life that awaited her was this one. And unlike her, he hesitated at that decision. He had killed billions of people and he didn't care in the least to kill billions more. But rarely had someone asked him to murder him. And he didn't expect someone from his team to ever ask him or anyone else that. But above all, he never thought that the only person he would consider not killing asked him to end his life. And seeing the doubt in Vegeta's eyes, Yam insisted again, this time unable to hold back her tears, please, don't let me live one more second in this state. I can't even kill myself. The good kids don't commit suicide. And at this point, Vegeta had no choice but to accept Yam's bitter request. Although for the first time he wouldn't enjoy killing someone. Grr. Yam, it's a shame this ended this way, Vegeta said while concentrating a large amount of ki in his hands to launch a powerful attack. A powerful attack to disintegrate Yam instantly and thus ensure that she didn't feel any pain. And once Vegeta gathered the ki necessary to perform his attack, he lowered his hand and pointed at the kneeling Yam. Feiyu. And shot. But. Stop. Gohan shouted, which at hypersonic speed stood between Yam, Vegeta and his attack, grabbing his hand and redirecting it to other way. And realizing that Gohan not only stopped his attack, but also kept clutching his arm with great strength. Vegeta dedicated his usual sweet and kind words to him, stop intruding on my path, insect. And Yam said in a very apathetic and even lifeless way, you again. What else do you want from me? And at that moment Gohan violently unleashed his emotions. What the hell is wrong with you? All you have in your head is to kill. All you have in your head is to kill. You don't know how to do anything else. You didn't listen to me when I spoke to you before. Gohan yelled, squeezing Vegeta's arm tighter and tighter, until the point where the blood circulation in his arm started to stop until almost turned blue. This child has become stronger. And without transforming. What the hell is this kid? Vegeta thought as he tried to break free of Gohan's grip, realizing that every second he was squeezing him harder. Thanks to you my life as a saiyan no longer makes sense. Why should it continue to exist? There are no reasons to live, Yam said once again with a terminally ill voice. How can you say there is nothing more? How about laughing with your friends? How about discovering new things? What about eating delicious dishes? How about your sister? I'll ask you one more time. Is your stupid saiyan pride above your sister's life? Yes or not? Gohan shouted with great anger once again when he saw the little value they gave to their own lives and that of others, at the same time that he tried to end his first evangelization. Ginger. Yam muttered as Gohan's words echoed in her head. Remembering her little sister, who was still captive in the perverted hands of mutant Rashi. Let me go, brat. Vegeta yelled, who couldn't continue pretending that his arm didn't hurt and was about to hit Gohan with the arm that was still free. But Broly quickly and authoritatively stopped that fight outside the ring with his powerful voice, che che che. No fighting without my authorization. And with this warning Vegeta stopped his attack and Gohan released Vegeta's numb arm. Ending that little conflict between them. Since you have won, despite having won patently due to the whim of my student, you are entitled to a Yam wish, although if you want me to remove that curse I have to disappoint you. It's something I can do with extreme ease, too easily, it would be very boring, pointless and stupid. What sense would it make for my student to beat you, surrender and use his ability in you then? Broly said to Yam as he looked at Vegeta askance, hinting that Vegeta could wish an exorcism in Yam. It is true, the wish. I had forgotten, Krillin and the others said, because due to the drama that was happening now, the great success against the invaders, they forget that there was a reward if the enemy won. And upon hearing what Broly had said and hinted, Vegeta began to think. A wish. Yam muttered again as she dug her fingers hard into the ground and frowned. Yam. Wish immortality for you and me. There's still my fight. If I am totally immortal, sooner or later I'll be the winner. Vegeta said to Yam with enthusiasm and urgency, proposing what in principle is a very coherent and correct decision. And obviously this alternative that could play against our protagonists raised certain alarms among the Z warriors. Oh shit. Broly-san, are you able to grant that? Yes, of course. Not a big problem, Broly replied, very relaxed, as if granting immortality to someone, and specifically to a genocidal sadist like Vegeta, wasn't a technical or moral problem at all. Shit. Piccolo yelled upon see how irresponsible Broly was being. Come on, Yam. Our journey will not have been in vain. Say it. Vegeta shouted with more enthusiasm when he saw that the wish for which they had made the catastrophic journey was just a few inches from his grasp. And Gohan, who was still located between them, began to worry about the outcome upon hearing Vegeta's authoritative order. And Yam, with great difficulty, pain and tears, screamed and hit the ground, and after a few seconds of silence, still crying, she said with a trembling voice. I wish. Have my sister back and let her run away safe and sound. Please. And upon hearing Yam's wish, Gohan was overjoyed. So much so that it seemed that this was a wish that had been granted to him. Ha. That's easy, Broly replied, teleporting the urn of Mutant Rashi where Ginger was locked to his hand. Hey. Mutant Rashi protested as he lost his prize. Pretty unexpected, said Piccolo, who began to fear Gohan's ability even more. Gohan is amazing, said Krillin, who began to admire his best friend's son in the same way that he admired Goku. I knew that you would reconsider and become good person. Very well done, Yam. Gohan said with much joy as he turned, crouched down and tried to help Yam get up, but above all to congratulate Yam for having decided to prioritize her loved ones over the slaughter and obey the strongest psychopath in her group. And Vegeta, who continued stunned by Yam's betrayal, which prioritized the life and freedom of her half-useless sister over Vegeta's order, his biggest interest, the immortality. He began to regain consciousness and with it, unleashed all the accumulated rage he had felt so far. You. And all of you. Fucking insects. Die. Vegeta yelled as he launched a ki-charged fist with killing intent. An uncontrolled and limitless rage that he directed towards the one he considered guilty of what had happened with Yam and with his ambition to be immortal. Gohan. Which was still helping Yam, unaware that a deadly punch was approaching to his head. Gohan. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.